parents separate is a little different from when a parent passes away. Anyway, we'll try and see what best we can do. What I thought is that since we have received some very, very insightful, very important questions, I thought let me work on the questions itself and from there expand out to cover various other things of how you navigate right from the time that a marriage goes bad or things of that sort, and then you start contemplating, should I continue, should I not. You work on both sides and things of that sort. So I'll first give you a quick insight into what I do personally, or my team here in Banjara does. If somebody comes to us saying that I have a marital issue, I'm having difficulties with my partner, we try and see if we can get the partner also into the counseling. If both of them come, our task becomes a little easier, because we can sometimes bring in the communication gap, or wherever there are some differences or something of that sort. It becomes easier for us to handle that. If one person doesn't come, one partner refuses to come, then we caution the other partner that we will not be able to probably help you a lot with your marital relationship, but we will make efforts to help you to understand yourself better, your state of mind, what decisions you need to take, whether you're doing something impulsively or whether you should wait or whatever it is. We take that person through. Now, when it comes to a point where, let us say, either one of the partners or both come to a point where they say that, sorry, I don't think I can continue with this marriage, things have really gone bad. At that time, I move over to helping them to understand what lies on the other side of the fence. So I play the devil's advocate and say, okay, can we visualize how life will be after everything is over? Just hypothetically think that you have separated, you have divorced, the legal matter is over, financial matter is over, everything is over. You're starting a fresh life. Now, what happens in that new life of yours? What would be the possible challenges to you? And if there are children involved, what happens to the children? So I make out a sort of checklist, which I modify depending on the person concerned and what the issues are likely, and make that person go through that to understand that I know what I am going to be in for. Because it does happen that if I am facing a lot of negativity, I get into that fight or flight syndrome. Either fight it out and make a ruckus and try and win over, or flight, that is, run away from the situation, let me just end it and get out. Now, I am a strong believer that you should not go away from something, you should go for something. So if you say that, yes, I am now in a marriage which is causing me a lot of turmoil, pain, and unhappiness, what I need to do at that point of time is to think, is there anything that I can do inside or outside the marriage which can make my life better? So if I'm contemplating separation and divorce, it should be with the idea that I want to move on to a better quality of life. I'm not very happy with this quality of life. It's not that I'm running away from it, but I'm going to aim towards a better quality of life. So once you start understanding what life is going to be after everything is over and you are free from the bond of this marriage, how life is going to be. When a person does that and says, yes, I have gone through, these are 1, 2, 3, 4 issues which I will work with. If some counseling is needed, we help, emotional support or whatever it is, if it is needed, we take the person along. But the person says, yes, now I am ready, that I want to move out. I think my life is going to be better outside the marriage if I close this chapter. Then, of course, starts the process. Some people are lucky that they go in for a mutual consent divorce. Matter of few months, if the judge happens to be good, your lawyer happens to be efficient, it just goes smoothly and everything is over. Some people, as you know, have to really fight bitter battles. So whenever we come across a situation where if you find yourself not being able to get away so easily, you have decided to separate, You have taken that step forward, you have started the legal process, but the legal process is just dragging on and on. And as long as the legal process, drags on, the emotional turmoil also remains. You are not free from that relationship. You are still battling that thing. It could also happen. Don't worry if it happens. It is very natural. Time to time, you may even get these thoughts: am I doing the right thing? Should I give another attempt? Should I get back to the thing and stop all this horrible legal process and all that is going on? Fine. Whenever that happens, we can sit, we can review, again, look at the pros and cons and things of that sort, and then move on. Again, as I told you, if it is only because the legal battle is becoming very unpleasant, then no, for that reason, you should not go back. But if you think life can be better by patching up and coming to some compromise and moving back with your spouse, then yes, we can definitely work on that. Presuming that the person wants to continue and get over with the thing. As long as there is the legal battle going on, emotions will be in a turmoil. Today we sit and discuss something, we do some counseling, we come to some little bit of solace. Tomorrow you go back into court and some unpleasantness happens or something of that sort, and again the emotions go into a turmoil. So all said and done, the way our legal system in our country is, you do go through a lot of turmoil. Please be ready for it. As I said, if you're one of the lucky people who get away very smoothly, excellent. But as the old proverb goes, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So if you are at that stage where you say that, no, I want to get out, or I've already gotten out, I've already separated, but now I have to start the legal process, be careful and be aware of the fact that it may not be as smooth as you think. It may drag on, there may be unpleasantness and all that. Please seek help, including have at least one or two people who stand by you. Sometimes we have come across people who say that I have nobody to go with me to the court, except the lawyer, of course. But I have nobody to go with me to the court. Some of our counselors have been very nice in saying that, okay, I'll come and just be there with you and stand outside or something of that sort. But better than a counselor, it would be very nice if you have a friend, somebody who really genuinely cares for you and who just comes there. Need not be a legal person, need not be helpful in any other way, but just friend is standing outside. Once I get out from here, we can go and enjoy a cup of coffee and relax or something. Even that plays a big role. Then comes the thing that if it is over, let's say that the legal battle is over and you have received your whatever, the divorce and things of that sort. Here again, I want to caution you that it is very rarely a day of celebration. Although you were fighting for it, you were struggling for it. When you finally get it, it's not like some reward, it's not like you have gained something. Technically, you may say, yes, I have won the case and I've got what I wanted, but it's not something very happy or very pleasant. There again, you need some emotional support when you come to that stage, because there will be a lot of friends or known people who may just say, hey, great man, you were struggling for so many days and now you got it, now you're a free bird, you can enjoy life and things of that sort. Somehow it doesn't work that way. Just be aware of that. It takes time after the legal process is over for the emotional process to come into play. And this I had discussed last time when we had a face-to-face meeting of the Bangalore people. We have to go through what is known as a grieving process. I'll just very briefly tell you what it is, and those of you who are interested can get in touch. I can, give you more details and stuff like that. What happens is that when there is a permanent loss of the human being in our life, when we know that this person is gone forever, there is a certain set of parameters, emotions, moods that we may likely go through. And When the hurt is so bad, when it is so severe and so deep, the proverb that says time is the best healer does not apply. As it happens with physical wounds, if I cut my hand a little bit, I can just wash it off and maybe put a bandage and say time is the best healer, it will go away. But supposing I have cut my vein, do you think time is the best healer? No way. It will keep bleeding, bleeding, and I'm going to die if I don't do something about it, right? So the same thing applies over here. If it was something minor, you could say time is the best healer, let me forget it and things like that. But that doesn't apply here. Here, time is not the best healer. You have to go through that process. The background to this is by a very amazing lady called Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was working with patients who were dying with terminal illness. So when a person acquires some illness where the treatment goes on, but the doctors finally raise up their hands and say, no, nothing can be done. That's the end of the treatment. We have tried everything. Now it's just a matter of time before this person dies. Dr. Elizabeth used to work with such people, and then with their families after the death takes place. So in years and years of her experience, she came out with 5 simple points of what she called as the grieving process. These are the steps that you are likely to go through, and you have to resolve each one of them. And then only you come to a level of acceptance and moving on and rebuilding your life. Otherwise, you'll be stuck in the grief that I have lost this person, life is of no use to me, everybody is going to anyway die, why should I even build any other relationships or whatever it is. That's how it used to go. Based on Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's basic theory, what I did was I said, even when there is a death of a relationship, the same principle applies. The other person is not dead, but the other person is dead for you. That person is irretrievably gone from your life. He or she is never going to come back into your life. And who is it? It is your so-called, what we call as the life partner. We all go into marriage thinking that it is a lifelong bond. That's why we use even the nomenclature of life partner. So certain rules, certain things apply very similar to the grieving process of death. What I recommend is go through that list, see how many are applicable to you. Some may be applicable, some may not be applicable. But whichever ones are applicable, you have to do something to emotionally resolve it. You can't just ignore it and say, time is the best healer, it will go away, I'll get busy with my work, I'll distract myself. Temporarily you'll succeed, but you will carry that baggage for a long time. It will affect you, it will affect your child, it will affect your work. That is the reason why we go through this process. So that is what I wanted to explain to you. When you say navigating divorce or separation or something, you have to go through. This, of course, also applies to widowed, that if you have lost your life partner to death, obviously these things are there and you need to work on it. But there are slight variations which I have evolved over a period of time working with different type of people. What happens to a person who has lost a partner to death, and what happens when you have lost your partner to separation and divorce. There are a few variations here and there, but generally the process remains the same. We go through the thing. So that is what I would recommend, that if you have not done that, just by stating a fact that yes, now I am legally divorced and I have no liability, I have nothing to do with my ex-spouse and all that, is not enough. You do have to look into the emotional aspect. And that came out in a very significant manner in the questions that I received from Mr. Vignesh. So I thought, as I told you, I will take you through that and then we can expand out. Plus, you can ask any more questions, doubts, and all that. We'll go through the process. I have one which says I'm divorced for 5 years now. I know the intensity of my anger has reduced with my ex, but I still feel it. Will this not go away at all? Should I have done something better to make this happen? Classic example of what I was telling you. Anger is definitely one of those steps of the grieving process. I need to resolve anger. Obviously, I'm going to be angry. There's something wrong with me if I'm not angry when life has treated me so badly, or when my partner has treated me so badly. I had so many expectations. I struggled. I wanted to make it work. I went out of the way to do nice things. I did everything to preserve this relationship. But the partner did not respond. The partner, in fact, was extremely bad to me in so many ways and things of that sort. So it is very natural to have anger. If you have denied that anger, you're suppressing it. You have to have anger against. And anger, like any other emotion, comes from within. There's nothing wrong with it. People have this, habit of saying, "Don't get angry. What's the point in getting angry now?" When you say "don't get angry" or "what's the point in getting angry," it is as though the person has decided, "I want to be angry." Nobody decides, "I want to be angry." No, it's just that anger is there. So the same thing applies over here. If 5 years have gone past, intensity of anger has reduced, but you still feel it. You need to resolve the thing. It could probably be going through a process of forgiveness. It could be probably a process of understanding what I could have done better and what mistakes I made. It could be looking at the life now in these 5 years and saying that what have I gained in these 5 years, which I would not have gained if I had not, disconnected from my partner. So I look at the positive side of life, and this is what I have. Or even in future, there is a lot of hope, there is a lot of good things awaiting me, which I would not have had if I had continued. So case to case, we need to work on that. So I would tell this person who sent in this question, work on your past, work on what your contribution has person, your partner. People say, why should I forgive him or her when the person has done such nasty things for me? The answer is very simple. You forgive in your mind. You don't have to tell the other person that you've forgiven. You have to forgive in your own mind for your own peace of mind. It's got nothing to do with the other person. He was bad to you, she was bad to you, they did whatever had to be done and all that, but it is over and done with. That person has moved on. The person may be happy, the person may not be happy. You've got nothing to do with the person. In fact, here I'd like to just take you one step forward. See, when we talk about marriage and lifelong partnership and all that, it is based on an emotion called love, right? Love is supposed to drive the relationship forward. The more you love your partner, the more you're willing to adjust, adapt, help out, do whatever has to be done. Now, when the other person is just not cooperating or is being bad to you or is doing things which are just not tolerable by you, what happens? The love starts receding. But the opposite of love is not hate. Please give a serious thought to this. If you hate your partner or ex-partner, that means somewhere deep down you still love that person. The love that you had earlier, on the basis of which you built your relationship, has not gone away completely. Love and hate keep oscillating between each other. Then you say, okay, so what is the opposite of love? The opposite of love is indifference. The day you can, yes, so and so was my partner for so many years. We shared a life together. We shared some happy days, and then we shared a lot of unhappy days, and then we went through this, and then it is over. But it's in the past. It is done. Now I've moved on. Now I have nothing to do with this person, so that person. Even when I think of it, I don't feel angry, I don't feel irritated, I don't feel a sense of revenge, nothing of that sort. So what we need to aim for is to develop a feeling of indifference towards the person. That person is no longer anything in my life. Okay, he or she may be the parent of your child, so to that extent, if there is some interaction, but even that can be done without emotional attachment. Yes, the child wants to talk to you. I will, come visit the child or meet with the child or whatever is there. Is like you would do for anybody else. Like you would tell a a teacher or a warden, okay, I leave the child here in the hostel and I'm taking the child back. You don't need to have any emotions attached to that warden or that teacher or whatever. It's just a practical thing. The same thing you need to do if you want to work on that issue. So that in a nutshell is what you need to do. Any one of you who finds like this person, that years have gone past, but still there is an anger, then we need to work on these different points, right from, as I told you, going back into the past, resolving what I have done, trying to forgive mentally, emotionally, forgive the other person. Okay, you were nasty to me. At that time, I had no choice. That's why I suffered. But now I'm not going to. So Mita has asked this question, how to forgive? I mean, practically. That's what I'm exactly coming to right now. At a practical level, you have to see whether you can convert that love into indifference. Can I be indifferent to this person? Can I say that I have no, yes, I had very deep emotions with this person. Obviously, that's why I chose this person and I stayed for such a long time with this person. But today I will accept that whoever's fault, whatever it is, I moved out. The second thing in the forgiveness is to look into your own role. Whether you agree or not, whether you accept it or not, I think you did contribute to whatever happened by being too nice. There are people who do that. You say, if I'm nice to him or her, the other person will realize my love and my sacrifices and will change. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. The more you are nice to the other person, the more the other person takes it for granted. A bad marriage is more like a cat than a dog. You heard of that proverb, no? You pick up a stray dog or a puppy from somewhere, wash him, clean him, feed him, look after him, give him security, give him food, give him everything. That puppy looks up at you and says, my God, you're doing so much for me, you're taking all care of me, you're giving such unconditional love. You must be God, he says. That's what the puppy thinks. You do the same thing to a kitten. You pick up a stray kitten, bring her home, look after, feed her, clean her, do whatever has to be done. And the kitten looks at you and says, you're doing so much for me, you're going out of the way to be nice to me, you're making so many sacrifices to me. I must be God. Now, that is rhetoric, but it is a fact. The other person starts thinking, why are you being so nice to me when I'm not being nice to you? I must be God. Maybe that's what I deserve. So the other person's bad behavior keeps increasing, and that's where your contribution comes in. So if you become aware now that with good intentions, but I gave that loose rope to the other person to ill-treat me, that helps me to calm down. The third thing at the practical level of forgiveness is to ask yourself, what happens if I don't forgive and what happens if I forgive? That was a time when you had control over me. That's why you did all these horrible things to me. Today, you have no control over me. We are totally separated out of each other's lives. I probably don't even know where you are. But will I still allow you to control my thoughts? And that's what I'm doing by thinking about him and say, what a horrible guy. Oh, that day, you know what he did to me. When I was so nice to him, he did this to me. How can I forgive him for that? In effect, what are you doing? You're allowing him to control your thoughts and make you unhappy and miserable even today. That is how this system works. I'm not going too much into detail because I'll move on to the next one. How do I manage the guilt of thinking that maybe I did not adjust and put more effort into making my marriage work? I always get advice from my close circle that everyone goes through a rough phase in marriage and we have to find a way to work with it. The most disturbing one is, for the child's sake, you should have stayed with marriage. Have I deprived my child of a father? In India, I don't know whether enough research has been done, but in the Western countries, there is a very clear thinking pattern based on surveys and research. It is better for a child to be brought up by one happy, contented, peaceful parent rather than by two miserable, angry, violent parents. That is what I want you to think. So today, when you ask this question, should I have, for the sake of my child, should I have stayed in the marriage? No. If the marriage was involving unpleasantness, arguments, violence, things which a child should not see, the child grows up very insecure. The child develops some negative habits. The child sometimes picks up those violent tendencies and all that. It's not worth subjecting your child to that. And it is not only what the child sees, even if the child senses that my mother and father were fighting when I was not here and things of that sort, even that is bad enough. Coming to this question that, you should have tried, everyone goes through and this and that, we can never generalize, no? You cannot say that because there are other people. And also, let me tell you, when somebody gives you this, advice that everyone goes through a rough phase in marriage, I think they are being very cruel and very unrealistic by making those statements. They cannot dictate what is a rough phase and how long it should be. I always have a very simple idea, suggestion. If you want to take advice from somebody, the person gives you an advice. If you don't follow it, see what is his reaction. If he gets angry with you, if he says, I told you to do this and you still don't do it, you didn't listen to me, please never ever take advice from that person. Keep away from that person. Because a person who advises you with your well-being in mind should have the magnanimity to say, see, this is what I feel. I feel that everybody goes through a rough phase, you should do it. But when you turn around and say, thank you very much, Ali, but this is not what I want to do, go ahead. I should know how to respect your wishes. Then only I'll be a good advisor to you. So don't take these type of people seriously. Then the third part of this thing was that, should I have put in more effort to make my marriage work? One is that obviously marriage has to be, they say, that only two hands can clap. So what's the point in my going on saying, I will do this, when this hand is not coming to clap? You know the answer. You have been through it. We have not been through. You know exactly what you went through. So every time you are putting in more and more effort, were you getting this reciprocation? If you are not getting it, then more efforts would have meant more taking advantage of you. That's what I mentioned a few minutes back. Keep that in mind.